In my career, I've seen so many of these like epoch shifts in technology, and today is one of those because I haven't presented in front of a big audience in quite a while. I think I've done this online. Last week I did one with 800 and so people, but it's all online. So you can't see people. You're actually presenting to yourself all the time. So this is one of the biggest I've done in the last 2 years. So it's exciting to be back. And like Alex said, I had COVID and I almost died. So this is really a great moment for me. The fact that I'm back up on stage here and I'm presenting again. And I will say the world's changed again. Alex seen me when I was at Google presenting, and I remember when I got up on stage in 1998 in the United States. I remember when I was in South Africa talking about certain technologies. And every time this has happened, I've always had the skeptics in the audience. But every single audience that I've presented to, these epoch shifts in technology, always like a decade later, they come to me and they go, yeah, you were right. You were actually right. I'll never forget this in the mid-90s. When I came back from Israel and I worked at Telkom, Telkom had a monopoly back then. You remember, you couldn't even connect two buildings to each other without like Telkom getting involved. It was illegal if you tried to set up a wide area network. And the nice thing about it, though, is the amount of technology spend that they had. Their IT budget was significant. And they had a special relationship with the Department of Defense in the United States. And I got to touch the first nodes. Not me individually, we were as a team. We had to oversee some of the ARPA, DARPA nodes of the internet. This is when the internet didn't have an interface and it was a defense network. We didn't even think it was going to be what it landed up being. But I'll never forget seeing the underlying protocols and noticing what was happening. And this was kind of in the mid-90s, early to mid-90s. And it was quite astonishing to see how many people were cascading into this domain. Every kid that came out of a computer science entity or had studied any programming wanted to work on this thing called the internet. And we started working on things called thin protocols, things like TCP/IP, thin protocols, like HTTP, thin protocols, standards like HTML and taxonomies, scripting languages, etc. These were thin protocols. So when we built these things and we participated in them freely, they built up this thing called the internet. And I remember going around showing people the internet. And I'll never forget the first time I showed people the internet. We were at Telkom and we said it's going to be huge. And we presented to a guy called Andy Mills. And he was an executive. And we told him how big it was. We put a tower down. We put a network card in. We bound the driver. We connected to the internet. Remember when you used to connect to the internet by screaming? And then you'd connect. You knew a good scream from a bad scream. And we connected to the internet. And then we'd say, OK, this is going to change the world. This is why. And then we'd download a movie and it would take a week and a half to 2 weeks to download. We're like, this is going to change everything. And people were like, no, it's not. No, it's not. It's not at all. But we knew it was going to be big. Not because of what was happening on the top. We saw the browser come along like Mozilla. We saw companies like Amazon come along, and that was exciting. The noise on the top we ignored because that was where the journalists were. That's where the noise was happening. But what was very interesting to us was this shift that was happening on a protocol level at the bottom. And in the computer science fraternity, in the area, in the world where we are and we live and we talk, the problem with, generally speaking, with engineers and software developers, etc., I think there's a couple in the audience, or someone introduce themselves. They're generally antisocial, they don't make eye contact, they hate sunlight, they code for 72 hours at a time. Right? These are the people that like work for me and some of the businesses that I'm invested in. They're typically the best engineers. And they're not out there screaming, they're not interested in the media, they're not interested in getting up on stage and showing their work. But what they're doing is magical. You know, these are the poets that write the stuff underneath that make these tectonic shifts happen. I saw it with the internet, and I'll never forget the goosebump moments I had. I remember when we started binding voice into data packets at Telkom, when we did a VoIP thing for the first time, where we actually sent our voice over an IP network to someone in the United States, and we got a reply. That was that goosebump moment, like, wow, this is going to be big, big, big. But it took 5 to 7 years to get to mainstream, and then what happened? We overestimated its impact. .com, boom, bust, but when we underestimated its long-term impact, and look at what the internet's done. Right, that was the internet, and I'll never forget in the late 90s, 1999, 98, I met a couple of people. I flew to MIT. I lived in the United States, and I flew to MIT at the campus there, and there was two people presenting, Nat Friedman and Miguel de Icaza. Nat Friedman is now the CEO of GitHub under Microsoft, and Miguel was the guy that developed some of the first graphical interfaces for Linux. I went to go see this Linux thing because I was working for this big company making multi-billion dollars per quarter on proprietary software. And this open source software thing, I'll never forget it, Eric Schmidt actually tasked some of us and said, go see what this is about. This is interesting. So I flew there, and I sat in the room, and that was my second goosebumps moment in my career. I'll never forget it. I walked in, and what I saw wasn't technological. What I saw was humanity in the room. I saw, people with nose rings and tattoos and ponytails and strange looking, but they were talking about code. They were talking about protocols. The intent that they had utilizing the technological tools wasn't a commercial intent, right? The greatest things that have ever evolved, developed in our lifetimes as a human species wasn't because someone did it for commercial value. We fly today not because the Wright brothers wanted to sell airplanes. Right? They didn't think about a commercial industry. Why? They just wanted to fly. Right? I love what Kevin Kelly says. He says, true invention and innovation doesn't exist amongst entrepreneurs or business people. It exists when people are having fun. Right? That's when true innovation exists. And I've seen that in my career over and over. So that's what I saw in that room. I saw a bunch of people sitting there, and they were talking about protocols, and they were talking about free and open source software, and I walked out of there, goosebumps, and I couldn't articulate it. Because open source software I knew was going to be big, but I couldn't tell you why. I just knew it was going to be big. And we started engaging with them, and I was part of a team that went and bought Zamir and a company, and then Oval got very involved in the free and open source software movement. I came back to South Africa, and that was amazing. Then I joined Google. Google wasn't even a goosebumps moment. It was cool, nice to be inside of Google, nice to start Google in South Africa and run the Africa operation. Cool. But fast forward to 7 years ago. It's 5.5 to 7 years ago. I need to be careful with my dates there. But I'll never forget this. I had built this thing called the Payment Pebble. Now, this was the third time I had my goosebumps moment. So let me just show you. I built the Payment Pebble, and Alec alluded to it. It's a little device. Before Square, before Yoko was even in existence, right? We actually filed a couple of patents before Square did. We engaged with Jack Dorsey in the very beginning to talk about infringement, etc., in the very, very, very beginning. But we built this little device that plugged into a phone that converted it into a card acceptance machine. Now, that little device required us to have very deep banking fabric understanding. Because what we did was we took this innovation and we supplanted it, or we augmented, or we amended a lot of banking fabric to enable a merchant to get this little device, to plug it into a phone, and to just make it work. And that required deep financial fabric understanding. PCI DSS, PCI SRED on the device, security standards, protocols, key exchanges, key injection facilities we had to build. We manufactured that device in South Africa. It still gets manufactured here. We needed security protocols. We had skins inside of the device that were electronic skins. If you tore them, the keys would, throw up. We actually had this thing where we were going to put a little vial in it. If you touched it and opened it up, it would have that like Mission Impossible moment where the smoke would come out of it. Remember that? It was incredible because we took a non-secure phone and we plugged the secure device over it, and we did the secure transaction with a chip and pin card for the first time in the world. No one had actually done it when we did it in South Africa. Jack Dorsey did it with a swipe because chip and pin wasn't in the United States. We did it with chip and pin, so we were activating crypto on keys, on a card, to exchange securely with a backend, and we had to build that backend because banks wouldn't touch their backend. So we really had a thorough understanding of the fabric. In fact, we were very successful. We launched it in South Africa. We went to Australia, New Zealand, Southeast Asia basin, and we did it in Philippines, Hong Kong, etc. Long story short, we built our own phone. I had a shower moment and said, we have the Pebble. Well, why don't we just build our own phone? And then we created what we call the Payment Blade. And that's in Yuppiechef today. So if you go to Sandton City or Cape Town in Yuppiechef, you walk in, you'll notice that they don't have point-of-sale infrastructure. They have human beings augmented with this technology that walk around and help you and check you out. Right? They went from a .com business, and their brick-and-mortar business wasn't a human being with a point-of-sale and a cash drawer taking up retail space. They gave that up, and what they did was they put human beings augmented with the Payment Blade. That's one of the founders of Yuppiechef. And the reason I'm sharing this is because this led me, if you go into Mr. Price, you'll see it too. You can check out, this is a queue busting thing over at Mr. Price. We built the technology, South African built. South Africa made 19 patents associated with it. Deep banking fabric. And then I was at Thumbs Up. This is about, I think it was 7 years ago. I'll never forget Simon Dingle. He wrote a couple of Bitcoin books since he's a journalist, right? And he was a journal back then. I called him and I said, this Bitcoin thing. I flew down to Cape Town and I asked him to set up my crypto wallet for me. And he set it up, and I was sitting across him, and he sent me Bitcoin. And I was like, what just happened? And he said, no, it's in your wallet. And I looked down, and it was in my wallet. I was like, but wait a minute. Where's the intermediary? Where's the clearing thing? Where did it? And he started telling me about how the miners work and how the network's set up. And then I promise you, that was the greatest goosebump moment in my entire life. Because I understood banking fabric better than most banks did. And here, suddenly, I was sitting in front of a crypto wallet that was exchanging value without any intermediary, more secure than in the history of value exchange of humanity. That was insane. I've never seen it. I couldn't get it. It took me 2.5 years for it to fully sink in. Everyone was like, no, man, this doesn't work, man. But but what if you do this? And every question I had, I brought some of my top crypto guys that were working to me at Thumbs Up, and we tried to say, can you hack the mining fabric? You know, the mining software, can you do that? Can you hack the protocol? Can you? It was just, the more and more we looked at it, the more and more we realized, oh my God, this is the greatest technological gift ever given to mankind. This is the internet, but much bigger than the internet. This is not an internet of information, this is an internet of value exchange without an intermediary. You don't need a government, you don't need a big bank when you're exchanging value. You can do it pretty much instantaneously, globally. For average transaction value right now, if you look at Bitcoin, about $3.50, no matter what the amount is that you're transferring, and you do it more securely than even exchanging cash in person. It's incredible. This is going to change everything. Just like I said in the 90s with the internet, just like I said with free and open source software. And today, every glowing rectangle on your desk is running open source software. That Apple iPad, that kernel on that device, that Apple phone, that Samsung phone, every one of your glowing rectangles, every single one of them, the core, the kernel runs free and open source software. The cloud runs on free and open source software. The internet is free and open source software. HTML, HTTP, all the protocols, etc. It's free. It's built by people on the outside. We now run big businesses, AWS, Amazons, etc., and we run it on this free network. We knew it was going to be big. This is going to have a bigger impact on the internet. Alec asked me how bigger, and I told him last night, exponentially bigger. What time frame? In the next, literally, now. It's happening right now. I'm going to show you some slides. I thought, what slide should I put up? So I'm going to share with you some things that are happening in the world in the last, I'd say, 3 days to 7 days. Big things are happening in the world again, and it's going to impact the financial fabric, the monetary system of the world tectonically. And Bitcoin's time seems to have come. In terms of maturity from a technology perspective, adoption, headline status perspective, people are now finally digitized and they're engaging in this thing and they're exchanging value and they're understanding what it is. And we are seeing people doing things that they should not do that's forcing us into an alternate way of value exchange thinking. So let's go into that. I love this slide. You see some general things. So let's start off with this. I don't think I've got time to talk about Milton Friedman, but I wanted to. Where he said the sole responsibility of business is to increase profits, right? That was a great fitness function in the early 70s that he gave us. But the problem with that fitness function is he didn't think about artificial intelligence. And what happened was we have businesses now with this valuation. Apple, 1 trillion. Look at that date, 2018. Now, over 2 trillion. Right? We've got businesses that are incredibly valuable. Now, but look at their value. If you take the top 5 tech companies in the world, Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Alphabet, except Facebook, the combined market cap outstrips every other business on the S&P, at least the bottom 282. We've never seen that amount of concentration of wealth, that amount of concentration of attention, that amount of concentration of productivity, that amount of concentration of economic activity in 5 organizations in the world. And yet, every single one of those organizations are platforms that are augmentations of us. If you take all our apps out of the Apple App Store, what is Apple? If you took all our services out of AWS, Amazon, it's just a bookstore that's break even at best. Google, if you take all our stuff off the internet, what's the search going to do? There's nothing to search. Keep going. Facebook, if you take all our stuff out of Facebook, what is Facebook? If you take all our videos out of YouTube, what is YouTube? These are businesses that are combinatorially innovative. They are just platforms and they're allowing for human expression. But the problem is we're seeing accentuation on the very top of the pyramid from an economic perspective because the fitness function of these businesses are based on Milton Friedman's function that he gave us. The sole responsibility of a business is to derive value for its shareholders, right? Now, if you take a look at that, $100 billion club, look at the top, most of them are technology companies. This is not healthy. This is not sustainable. Look at productivity soars, wages stagnate. I put a little term up there. AI is a superpower. Its kryptonite is inequality. We can't keep going like this because we're doing more with less versus thinking what was previously unimaginable finally being imaginable today. As a business leader today, these tools like artificial intelligence, these tools allow you to do more with less humans, but I would encourage you to rather think about doing more of what was previously impossible. So reimagine. Human-machine symbiosis is the greatest derivative of technological advancement, not humans being disintermediated by technology. That's dystopian. And we're already seeing dystopia raising its head. We're already seeing businesses that are invading our privacy. We're already seeing a lot of those things. So just another thing that's driving a lot of this. 21% of all dollars printed in 2020, or 21% of US dollars were printed in 2020. This is insane, the amount of fake liquidity in the markets. Just reserves, just printing. Why? Because of lockdowns and what we've seen happen in the last couple of years. Lots of economic factors there. This is not sustainable. Keep going, right? Governments clamping down on users. Trudeau. Bitcoin has got 2 chief marketing officers today. One's called Justin Trudeau and the other one's Vladimir Putin. They're the ultimate chief marketing officers for Bitcoin. Ultimate. Look at what Trudeau did, right? The truckers protested, sure. There was no violence, bouncy castles. He got pissed off at everyone, and what did he do? He deplatformed everyone that attended that event or participated in some way. They did visual analysis of the CCTV camera footage, journalistic footages, etc. They dredged, and they were deplatforming people on the basis of some act, emergency act. Deplatforming meant if you had a bank account, the bank said, shit, you just couldn't have a bank account. You couldn't do transactions. That is power that is dystopian. And we're seeing this not in some third world despot. This is Canada. This is Trudeau, right? We saw this, and then last night that happened. This is last night, March 2nd. Just in EU has announced that the following Russian banks will be removed from the SWIFT system. Deplatforming countries now. We have the ability to take a country and deplatform it. That is not what we should be doing. This is not the power that, this power in the moment may seem relevant and positive, but this power being available is dystopian. We take a look at the Credit Suisse, just the latest financial crisis, because this is an argument against everyone that says, yeah, but Bitcoin's used for drugs and porn. Okay, then what is fiat currency being used for? Global lockdowns and etc. Bitcoin price jumps as Ukraine and Russia boom. The Russia booms, right? Look at the lines, people trying to get their money out of ATMs. Look at what the central bank in Ukraine did yesterday, right? You can't take any money out anymore. PayPal accounts, all electronic currency frozen. Where are people going? They're jumping into Bitcoin. Bitcoin's price is tremendously up, and this is why over the last couple of days. So this is what people are saying. We don't trust government, we don't trust the banking system, we don't trust local currency. The majority of people have nothing else to choose from but crypto. It is the only alternative that they have. So they suspend trading. But money's pouring in, right? You're seeing Ukraine raising funds. Look at the amount of money that they're raising. Crypto investors have raised more than 30 million. That number this morning when I looked, I think it's at $47 million. Take a look at how they're doing it. Dogecoin. Right? Dogecoin exceeds Russian ruble in value. We start to accept it. This is a government member in the Ukrainian government, right? They're now accepting Dogecoin, and they're putting up their wallet address for their Dogecoin. So you can see this is how the money's coming into Ukraine. This is how it's funding a lot of things that are happening there right now. Somebody took their NFT and they put it into their Ethereum wallet. Yeah, that NFT over there, and I think that NFT over there is worth almost, maybe wrong, I think that one's $2.8 million. Got donated, right? Just in Ukraine, government started accepting donations in Solana, another blockchain-based currency. Why is this happening? What is this metaverse, NFT, blockchain, Bitcoin stuff, and why is it gaining a momentum? For all the reasons I gave you before, but this one is most interesting. Why? Because the average age of the people coding and developing in the metaverse, with NFTs, with all these like distributed finance, etc., are who? Are Gen Zs. The average age is 19 and a half. The average age of the people developing, coding, and making these things are why. But why are they doing it? You know why? Because this is the most disenfranchised generation in the history of humanity. They lived through the 2008 financial crisis. They saw what their parents went through. That was the first big dent that banks had. Banks suddenly like, what, a bank? Don't tell me about a bank, right? This is a generation that doesn't believe the banking system. This is a generation that's dredged it and they've seen what people do with the banking system. Just take a look at what happened over the last 72 hours. If you were Gen Zer, mix it up with 2008. They have their entire digital lives. They have no privacy. These are people that have their entire lives from the day they were born till now inside of Facebook. Their parents put it there. They have the least amount of privacy of any generation in the history of humanity. They've got their birthdays, their first time they walked, their graduations, the first time they rode a horse, they went to wherever in the world, etc. It's entirely in a digital social container. Their digital information shadows are so rich, and guess what? They don't even own it. Facebook owns that data because their mom and dad just clicked on the EULA, the end user license agreement, and just uploaded that content. Second thing is the pandemic. For the last odd years, These kids have been told that we're dying. They've seen deaths like the previous generations in world wars around them all the time. They've seen anti-vax movements, pro-vax movements. They've seen disinformation, information. It's incredible. Climate change. They don't think the physical world's going to be around. I have a 21 and an 18-year-old in my house, my eldest two daughters. They're 21 and 18. Right? This is them. This is where I'm getting my data from. This is what sits around my table. For them, the world's over. You guys have trashed it, and you continue to trash it. It's not going to go away. Global leadership. They don't believe in global leadership. They saw Trump coming up, and they have their views on Trump. I'm not being political or anything. They're seeing what's happening in Germany. They see what's happening in Italy. They see what's happening in Russia today. Global leadership is failing them. Then they see senseless war. This generation is the reason there's a metaverse, the reason there are NFTs, the reason there's Bitcoin and DeFi, because you know what? It's because of you and I. They are tired. They don't believe the physical world anymore. They place more value in a sneaker that's in the metaverse that they can buy with a certain cryptocurrency than they believe in a physical sneaker in the physical world. You and I may scoff at it. You and I may laugh at it. You and I may not understand it. That's not the point. You and I have become what our parents were in the early 2000s and late 1990s when we told them about the internet. It's just a fad, it's going to go away. They are building this new fabric. They are building a new global monetary system. And they're building application sets on top of it. NFTs are merely expression of humanity inside of them, putting value in a place where dictators can't touch it, putting value in a place that doesn't get affected by terrestrial conditions, putting something in place that is sensor resistant. That's what they're all about. This is Gen Z. These are the people building these technologies. They're not going away. Right. So I'm just going to skip through some of the slides. I'm in a 23-year-old Texan made $4 million last year mining Bitcoin or flare gas from an oil drilling. I mean, you know, flare gas, it just gets like 70 to 90% of it just disappears by burning it. It's a waste. Well, they put a generator on top of it. I think I've got a picture of it. There, they put a generator on top of it. That's a Bitcoin mining chassis, a whole bunch of ASIC devices inside of that. And notice there's enough of this excess gas that's just flared right into the atmosphere to power the entire Bitcoin network 7 times over. So this notion that Bitcoin is just energy, gobbling, and it's bad for the planet. Well, there's a 23-year-old kid in Texas solving that problem right now. Like, take a look at it. Last night, I took the snapshot of CoinDesk. It's 44. I think this morning, it's $43,000. Look at how it's climbed since the 24th of Feb because of what's happening in terms of geopolitics. Just in the last 24 hours, 50 million was paid out to miners, people that are mining the Bitcoin network. 90% of the supply has been issued. More retail investors now than whales. The question of, like, wait a minute, there's just a few people that own most of the Bitcoin network. Well, guess what? That's over now. Literally in the last month and a half, there are now less whales than there are retail. Whales are people that own 1,000 or more Bitcoins. 76% has not moved in the last 6 months. Why? It's a store of value. People believe it. The Sharpie ratio, it's double gold and the S&P 500. I've got a slide that actually speaks to that. Take a look at that. Its share price relative to its risk ratios. They're Bitcoin's highest Sharpie ratio. Take a look at Bitcoin, take a look at stocks, real estate, gold, and bonds. It's double gold and double the S&P 500 in terms of being a better risk asset from a store value perspective. The fundamentals are now in place. Here's some of the things that they're saying. You cannot flee a tyrannical government or vaccine mandates with gold bullion bars. The world is waking up to the fact that every form of money that exists right now, except Bitcoin, can and has been manipulated by political and centralized forces, especially during a crisis, and people are opting out. This is happening. People are deplatforming themselves and putting themselves into a monetary system that is more sustainable, that has and no one can influence it. No one can politicize it. We trust the digital more than we trust the tangible. Companies that own Bitcoin, we're seeing institutional investment now happening where people are taking off their bottom line, saying, wait a minute, our portfolio, we've got bonds, we've got stock, we've got money in the bank. Let's rather take our business's money, at least a portion of that, and put it inside of Bitcoin. It's inflationary hedge. It's proven now that it's a good inflationary hedge. It's a great store of value. Now, the whole notion around a medium exchange, watch what happens. Go to El Salvador. Okay, I think I got something in there. This is the market cap of BTC. Yes, IMF urges El Salvador to remove Bitcoin as legal tender. So here's a country in the world that shoved their own sovereign currency and they went Bitcoin. 100%. In El Salvador, Bitcoin is legal tender. Every merchant must accept Bitcoin. Right? This came out from the IMF just the other day, note March 1st. Fun fact though, in El Salvador, more people have Bitcoin wallets than traditional bank accounts. And by the way, just look at this. That's the head of El Salvador. They're saying the GDP growth in 2021 was 10.3%. That's the highest GDP growth in the history of their country. So Mexico's on the list. It's going to flip over soon. We're watching that right now. We see lots of government, Congress members, Senate members in the United States supporting this. Mayors are supporting Bitcoin. I just saw yesterday Denver now allows you to submit tax payments in Bitcoin. There's quite a few things now you can submit utilizing your Bitcoin. And they're utilizing not just Bitcoin, they're using Ether, there's Solana, there's different blockchains that they're utilizing. So it's reshaping the energy industry. I think Eskom, well, guess what? Eskom, Bitcoin mining could be the thing that makes you more money than those folks actually on a local government level buying energy from you. You know, we're seeing energy companies jumping into Bitcoin mining, and it's reshaping. What we could see, and this is a positive that's out there, the future of central banks could be mining oil, mining companies. They could be the issuers. They could be the custodians of some of the biggest Bitcoin mining infrastructure. And right now they are, and it continues to grow. But lawmakers are getting involved. They want to know more about it. Now here's the problem with Bitcoin. Everyone wants to talk about that. When do I buy it and when do I sell it? You just want to talk about it as a speculative asset class. This is just like the 90s. You want to talk about all the web vans and all the IPOs and pets.com, but you don't want to talk about the underlying, actually understanding the protocols underneath it. And that's what makes me so excited. So, I think we're going to go to the chat now, but just in terms of where we are on the spectrum. Now, I don't like the term Web3. I think it's loose, but I'm accepting it right now. But Web 1 was all about just read, read, read. Web 2 was read and write. I mean, look what Web 2 did. It gave us the businesses that I just showed you, the economic value that it incurred. Web 3 is very, very different. It's read, write, and it's own, where you create things as an NFT, and you own it, and you can have partial ownership of it. It's extremely powerful things. I saw a South African band that went completely bankrupt because of lockdowns, scream on Facebook. I'm not going to say the band's name, but this was last year, beginning of last year. They screamed on Facebook that they lost all their money. Lockdowns, they can't play in front of any audience. I pinged them, they pinged me, they found out about me, and we went back and forth. I found out they reckoned about 50 to 60,000 fans, true fans, people that really buy their music, etc. I asked them how much did they make per annum. They said it was about 2.5 to 2.8 million rand in performance income that they make within a year. I asked them about NFTs. They had no idea what an NFT was. Like, what do you mean? I said, okay, I told them, explained to them, etc. They did 3 NFTs. They did, I'll just talk about the first one. They took 3 songs, unreleased, never before played, and they released it as an NFT. Someone bought it for 1 million rand, right, within 24 hours. The second one was album cover work. Now, you may say, well, what? It doesn't matter what you think. Someone out there believes that that was 1 million rands worth. Okay. I don't think the Mona Lisa is worth anything, but it's invaluable. Right? I don't believe a crypto punk. I don't think a bored ape, an ape with a face with a smiley with a cigarette and a joint in his head. I don't think that's valuable. It doesn't matter. There's enough in that community that believes the value of that. The art world speaks to that all the time. Right? This band made over 2 million rand in the first week of generating their NFTs, and that was their money. It's on my Twitter, if you go take a look at who they are. It's on my Twitter account. I actually share the band's details, and they actually go back and forth with me on Twitter. It changed their lives, NFTs. Right, but you know what the cool thing is about NFTs is that not only does the song go up as an NFT, but anytime that song gets traded ever again, they put a 2.5% mark on that. So anytime you sell it thereafter, they'll make 2% of that in its perpetuity. It'll land up in the ETH wallet. Okay, and that's quite incredible. Breaking, JP Morgan funds first bank in the decentralized metaverse. Great resignation. So I just want to get to this, Alec. This is one point I want to make. Because everyone asks me, like, where is it going and, like, what's going on? You've just shared so much. Well, let's talk about it. In 2007, I remember getting up and presenting on this. This was when Steve Jobs, 3 things happened in 2007, and I believe those 3 things have happened in the last 24 months that will dictate what the technological roadmap looks like for the next probably 36 months to 5 years, in my opinion. So in 2007, the following happened. Do you remember this? Right? Nokia, 1 billion customers. Can anyone catch the cell phone king? This was in November the 12th cover of Forbes magazine. Right? We always think that that's who can ever break the banking system? Who can ever be bigger than this? Who can ever? And guess what happened? This guy got up and he showed us the iPhone for the first time in 2007. We had never seen a device like the iPhone before. And what was different about the iPhone wasn't just because it was beautiful to look at and it didn't have a keyboard, etc., etc. But the cool thing about an iPhone, it had this this ability to be augmented. They had this API, they had this thing called an app store, where we could create application services on top of it. And it birthed a brand new way of delivering a business, not as a business with products, but as an architecture of participation. Right? It was a collective intelligence personification. It was incredible. The iPhone was just, and then what happened after that? In 2007, in that same year, we suddenly saw a generation emerge that eclipsed every other generation in the workplace. There were more millennials in the workplace than there were non-millennials in the workplace, or any other generation. The number of people, urbanization, suddenly surpassed anyone living outside of cities. Humankind lived more in cities than lived outside of cities. These three things happened in 2007. Urbanization, human movement, generational change, and a technological injection. Those things created a smoothie that gave us all the technological advancement that you saw all the way up until the beginning of 2020. So what does 20 and 2021 mean relative to this, and using that as a metaphor or as a principle? Let's look at it. So in 2021, in 2020, the following happened. So we had the iPhone, all of those things, but then that thing on the top happened, crypto. Right, Bitcoin was always there, but now the tools have never been easier. It's never been easier to get into it. Mass digitization, the second one, it's not just Gen Zs. Because of lockdowns, here's a statistic, Okta, in the top 5 economies in Europe during lockdown in 2020, they did a statistic, 55% of all the people that went to go work from home during lockdowns in 2020 had never worked from home before, in the top 5 economies in Europe. The amount of infrastructure investment, the amount of hyper-digitization, we saw intergenerational amalgamation. Didn't matter. No matter what your age or whether you were digital native or not, you had to put your card into a site to get groceries at home, right? Because you were in lockdown. People started getting digitized, and that hyper-digitization, the forecast that we had literally for the next 20 years, happened in about 18 months. In 18 months, what we forecasted would happen in between 15 and 20 years in terms of hyper-digitization of the civilian base out there happened literally in 18 months. That was astonishing. Second thing is urbanization. Well, guess what? Work from home. What does work from home mean? Everyone went home and infrastructure was put in place. Broadband connections, right? Technology, laptops. Everyone started connecting. But the big thing here was enterprises put in so much infrastructure to allow people to remotely access things from the outside. Those three things will dictate what our world will look like. These are the big currents in the water, very deep down. No matter what the froth and the noise is at the very top, this is the stuff that moves technology in a particular direction. And when I combine these three things, all I can see is the next generation internet is here. The biggest network, the biggest human impact from a humanities perspective, from a technological amalgamation perspective, is now taking place. People are not going to stop using Bitcoin. Will it go down? Yes, it may go down. Will it go up? Maybe it goes up. I don't care. The point is that every one of you in this audience, just like I said in 1999, every one of you will have a browser on your desktop and on your phones. I'm telling you now, every single one of you in the next 3 to 5 years, the next 36 months, every single one of you will have an NFT. Every single one of you will utilize an NFT at least once a week to authenticate in the next 3 to 5 years. You're going to have an NFT because the title deed of your house won't be shoved into some governmental system. It will sit somewhere as an NFT. Your identity itself, the access into whatever social bowling club you belong to, will be an NFT-based authentication. When you authenticate in, because there's a new digital identity framework emerging from NFTs. Don't worry about NFTs being Bored Apes and all that stuff. Underneath, what's happening is a new way to authenticate, a new way to repudiate, a new way to identify, and the whole class system underneath it from a cultural perspective and a humanities interaction perspective. Every one of you will have an NFT. Every one of you will have a crypto wallet in the next 5 years. Every single one of you. You'll be interfacing with a crypto wallet in some way or form. You'll be buying something. What I find absolutely astonishing is cross-border transactions. As a technologist, it's like a cross-border email. It's like, what? You can't have cross. It's like money should be friction. Money should be able to move in a way like you send an email. It's not like that today. Well, guess what? That's changed. We now have not cross-border money, which is fiat. We now have money like email, where you can just send it, and it's completely frictionless.